So I had a request to talk about meetings and minutes and what happens and how you keep actions and track all that sort of stuff. So here we go. So I think meetings get a bit of a bad rap, as I'll talk about in a minute. But I think mostly the pain of meetings happens when you leave the meeting, because what happens is you take all these notes and you write down all these actions during the meeting, and then people leave a meeting with a notepad that looks like this, and then they never read those notes again. And so I think, what was the point of capturing all of that stuff? What was the point in writing all that down unless you do something with it later? So here's how I would handle that. And meetings, like I just said, I think get a bad rap. I don't think there's anything wrong with a meeting. And in fact, I'd much rather stand in front of a whiteboard with half a dozen people and work a problem out in 25 minutes than be interrupted 6 times a day for a week with those same people in email trying to figure something out. Now, of course, this assumes that your meeting is structured and has a clear objective, that it actually has some purpose. Fortunately, there's an easy way to make sure that any meeting has some clear purpose, and that's to link the pieces of that meeting to IDs in your system. Because I think if you can't put an ID to a section of a meeting, if you can't identify the thing in your Johnny.Decimal system that it is about, then what are you talking about? Why are you talking about it? Let's make that concrete with some examples. All right, let's say me and Lucy are having our quarterly business review meeting for the Johnny.Decimal business. So there are a few things we're going to want to talk about. We're going to want to talk about the business plan, which is 11.21 business plan. These are IDs from the small business system, linked below. And then we'd want to discuss the business finances. So the most appropriate ID there is going to be 13.13 reports and reviews. And then let's say we want to discuss the YouTube strategy for these videos that I'm creating. We've got an ID that we've created there, and that's 31.13 YouTube. So we've got 3 topics for the meeting, and that's 3 IDs. Now, what if you don't have an ID for a thing? Think about this. Think about if there's some other important thing that we want to discuss in this meeting, but we can't identify an ID in the system for it. Well, in my mind, that basically means until an ID exists in my system, it doesn't exist in the business, right? That's why the JDEX is so cool. You start there, you create a thing there. The IDs there practically define the business shape. Of course, you might not already have one. We didn't start with 31.13 YouTube. So just create one, right? That's the whole point of this thing, is you just create one, and it's super easy. We might want to talk about something to do with our sales channels, category 32. So we just create an ID there, and now we can discuss it. And you might be saying, this is ridiculous, what you want to create a note for each of these things. And I would push back and challenge you. Of course, you need to create some identifiable place where you can talk about this thing. Because why, in this world of almost limitless information, would it be too much to ask that you simply create a note, a place for you to keep some records about the thing that you're discussing? And that's literally what it is. It's Command N in Obsidian, or it's Control N in OneNote, and you find the next ID and you type a title for it. It takes 10 seconds, but what you're doing is giving it a place to this thing that you can now discuss it. Okay, back to the meeting. We have a very well-structured meeting now. We've decided we're going to discuss these 3 things. Now, what about the minutes? There is a very natural conflict here, a face-off, if you like, because you've got the meeting, which is a very tangible thing. It's an event in time. It's a thing you might have physically walked to if you're at work. And those things have a very strong anchor in your mind. And then you've got these 3 topics that we discussed in the meeting, which are the IDs throughout your system. And the question is, the essential question is, which of these things, is it the meeting, the event, or is it the things you discussed at the meeting? Which of those things is the primary thing? Where do the minutes belong? And I think this is the mistake we continue to make. We treat the meeting as the primary thing, and the meeting is not the primary thing. The meeting is a means to an end. The things you discussed are the primary things. Because you meet for the sake of the things you're discussing. You don't meet for the sake of meeting, unless I'm sure you all have one of these meetings on your weekly calendar. And that's how you identify a poor meeting, I think, where the meeting almost has devolved to the point where you're meeting for the sake of meeting. And nobody can really quite identify what it is that you're talking about. Because a well-structured meeting should go like this. You've got the first thing to discuss, 11.21 business plans. You do that. You discuss those things. You take some notes. And then ideally, and I know this is ideal, right? I had a corporate job for 20 years. Ideally, you finish talking about that thing. And that it might take you a second to move on, to context switch to the next thing, what was ours, 13.13 financial reports and reviews, that you might have to then open a different note in your note system to talk about that thing. I see that as a feature, not as a bug, right? That is a thing to be desired, that you have these clear delineations between the sections of your meeting. And also later, think about this, when you want to retrieve some, like, what did we talk about? 13.13 reports and reviews. What did we say? You, as someone else, as a third party, say you're at work, someone else in the team couldn't make the meeting. They shouldn't have to, they might only be interested in that part of the meeting. And in 6 months' time, they shouldn't have to know that you met on a certain date and time and have to somehow recall these meeting minutes to understand what was said there. If there were important things discussed that have some longevity and some relevance to the thing being discussed, they should be with the thing that you discussed, not with this meeting, which by now is 6 months old and completely irrelevant. But you are saying, surely I must have some record of this meeting. And of course you do. You need something to bind these things together. Fortunately, we have computers, and computers make this sort of thing very easy indeed. Here's what I do. This is what we save the standard zeros at the very top of your system. You might notice we don't use numbers that generally start with a zero, and they are for things that span your entire system. So in my system, I've got a note titled 00.16 list of all meeting minutes. And that's exactly what it is. In there, for each meeting, create a header with the date and the title of the meeting. This is where you can write down who was at the meeting and who was an apology and all that sort of usual meeting control stuff. And be consistent here. This is another Johnny.Decimal theme. Be consistent. Always give these things a consistent pattern. If you give them nicely in Obsidian, say you use markdown headers, a level header 2 and a level header 3, and then you can fold these things away. Always do it the same every time. And then what you do is you link using internal wiki links across to the other notes, to the sections where you discussed this thing in the meeting. Now, this isn't an Obsidian tutorial. I'm not going to show you this in great detail. We'll put some things up on the screen, but you get the idea, right? I've got one control note. This is the meeting note. And what I'm doing is using it as an anchor place to link back to the concepts that we discussed. But the details of what we discussed in those concepts are over here with those concepts. Another neat trick you can do using an Obsidian internal link, if you put an exclamation mark before a wiki link, again, not an Obsidian tutorial, you can find details about this online, we'll put some links below. You can even have Obsidian show you the contents of these things, as in the actual text, in this meeting note. So it's really powerful and a way to bind this thing together. I don't know how well that scales. I don't know what happens if you have a single note with 500 meetings in it. That might slow Obsidian down. I don't know, but you can try that out. All right, what about all the actions you recorded? This is just so easy. Guess where actions go to die? They live in your meeting minutes. That is not a place for actions. Obsidian is not your task manager. It shouldn't be, because it's not a task manager. It's a great notes app. It's not a task manager. Use a task manager for tasks. The first thing you should do when you leave a meeting is take the actions you wrote down and extract them into a proper task manager. I use things, you use whatever you like. We've got a JDU course below showing you in 4 hours worth of video exactly how I manage my business using things. There you go. Obviously, that was a very quick look, right? We keep these videos short because otherwise people don't watch 20-minute YouTube videos. We are thinking about recording a little mini course. Actually, now that I've thought about this, I think there is some interesting detail here. I definitely could see how I could show this in proper detail in Obsidian, perhaps give you a template. So I've already put that on the list. We'll see about recording a little how to do meetings mini-series, and we'll put that on JDU. Link below. Let me know if you found that useful, if you thought that was ridiculous. I know that is not how most people do meetings and minutes, but how most people do meetings and minutes from my experience of attending literally thousands and thousands of meetings is that they're completely shockingly broken. So maybe it's time to think about doing them a different way.